I just got to the studio and I am realizing that today's video is going to be a little different for my studio and also for you guys. So they have tasked me with coming up with my top 10 breed recommendations for families with children. Now, honestly, this list is virtually impossible. So come with me while I sit down with my team to let them know that we need to change and go in a different direction. I'm Kayl. Welcome back to McCann Dogs.
Can you break down for me and for the audience at home, why is this so difficult to do? Specifically when it comes to a top 10 breeds for families with kids.
It's difficult to come up with a breed specific list when it comes to having kids specifically, because there's so many things that are in question when it comes to choosing dogs for families. You can sometimes have an easier time if they don't have kids, but I personally think that as soon as you bring kids into the mix, you have a lot more questions to ask. And I think if I was just to rattle off, 5 or 10 breeds that would be great, that's fine. But every household that has kids has completely different scenarios. I might ask things like, where do they live? Not city wise, but like, do they live in an apartment? Do they live in on a farm? Do they live where they have property? What do they normally do with their dogs? Are they just going to be like taking it for like 2 walks a day type of thing? Or like, are they hiking with it? Are they taking it places? Do they want it just to like snuggle with their son on the couch at night? Like, what are you getting the dog for? Because every breed is going to have different genetic makeups that are going to make it better suited for those types of things or not. If I was giving advice to a family who had kids that were looking for a puppy, what I would probably do is, number one, talk about the lifestyle, which we've already talked about. Number two, think about what personality of dog would be good for the family. So once you've narrowed down the breeds about, so you have an idea of what size would be best, what coat type would be best, what energy level would be best, and you have you have the breed figured out. It doesn't just stop there. For me, if you're going to go to a breeder or wherever you're going to go to get your dog, it would be helpful to know what type of puppy you're going to get within that litter, for example. So, as someone who bred Border Collies, if I knew that that puppy was going to a family with kids versus going to a family without kids, I would be much more selective as to which puppy would go. I would pick the confident puppy, but not too confident. I would pick the lower energy puppy, the less prey drive, whatever the situation must be. Disclaimer: if you have a Border Collie, they're not good with, typically not good with as family dogs. Ours were all going to sport homes that have dog trainer people that have kids, so that's a bad example. However, the point of the story is making sure the breeder can actually be able to select the puppy that makes the most sense, considering that there's kids that are going to be involved. Puppies or dogs that are a little bit worried sometimes have trouble with kids, because kids squeak and squawk and run around, and they hit dogs, and they, fall over, and like nothing's intentional, but they're busy. And it's hard to like contain them into a little thing because the dog's there. If you have a dog that's a bit more on the hardy side, they typically can do better with kids. If you have a dog that's less sound sensitive, they can typically do better with kids. If you have a dog that's much more easygoing, that isn't going to be prone to like food bowl, bone possession, things like that. Like, there's certain personality traits that are going to succeed better in a home with children than dogs that don't. So I don't like to be super breed specific. There are a few breeds that I would never suggest for a kid. I typically won't suggest Border Collies or any of those high drive herding type dogs, because they just are attracted to motion, and there are already a lot of dogs for adults, let alone children. Any of the bigger breeds that are a little more emotionally sensitive, so like shepherds and things like that can tend to be a little bit more reactive if they don't have the right leadership from adults. They sometimes aren't great with kids. And again, I'm sure people listening to this are going to say, I had a German Shepherd with kids, and Matt German Shepherd was great. Perfect. So glad it worked out in your favor. So that's why you can't get so specific about breeds, but there's certain breed traits and personalities that will be harder to deal with kids, to react around kids, to be comfortable with kids than others. You really want to look for temperaments of dogs that are known for being a little bit more easygoing, less sensitive, those types of things, because they're hardier and they can deal with, life with kids, which is very busy, sometimes loud and sometimes stressful and all of the things. And you need a dog that's going to be able to like sort through that, along with, getting the attention and training that they need.
So it's pretty clear on one side, you can sort of say genetics and breed tendencies. There's some specific breeds that you would lean away from promoting or identifying as breeds that would be good for a family. So on the flip side, is there breeds, obviously breed specific and dog specific changes things, but breeds that tend to lean more towards a family style pet that you would recommend?
Yeah, if I was giving suggestions to an active family with kids, that was going to like go camping or get outside with the dog and do a little bit more active things, obviously a golden or a lab would be at the top of the list. But then also there's tons of like really great mixed breed dogs as well, that would have like golden or lab or poodle mix into them, like Goldie Poos and things like that, Labradoodles. I mean, all the Doodles are typically pretty hardy, great family dogs. Obviously, they have a list of funny things that go along with them as well, but typically speaking, they can be pretty good. If you're looking for dogs that are a little bit more on the smaller side, one that I always recommend is the CKC Spaniel, because they're usually pretty easygoing dogs. Don't require a ton of exercise. They would be good for just like hanging out, but they also like to do stuff too, which is great. Dachshunds are usually pretty good. Frenchies that are a little bit more on the smaller side. I'm trying to think of like medium-sized dogs. Again, then you're looking into like hair, no hair, if you have preference that way. This is a weird suggestion, but like beagles, they're usually pretty easygoing as well. Sometimes a little harder to train because they're a little bit more independent, but typically nice dogs all around. You're looking for dogs that haven't been overbred and that have easygoing temperaments. Are sort of things that you were doing. But often if like you go on, what's sort of annoying as well is if you go on like Google and you search it, most of the time they're only going to come up with like purebred dogs because of the CKC, AKC, all that kind of stuff. But there are so many lovely mixed breed dogs out there that are also great family pets as well. Anything with a whippet in it, great. Lurcher, those usually are typical like whippet crosses. Again, if you're looking for something a little calmer, having the whippet in there is usually a nice mixture. They're just more chill. They like to lie in blankets all day long. So yeah, you have to look at your family dynamic and how much you're going to do with it. And then I think it's also important to realize that you need to know how much effort you're going to put into the dog, because if you are a young family and you have a bunch of kids and they're all going to sports every day and you're already running around and you got lots going on, bringing a dog, and if you have an idea of how you want your dog to be, bringing a dog into the household is probably the worst idea, because it's just another thing. You've got to feed it, you got to walk it. Honestly, you've got to train it if you want it to go. So that's another cost, time commitment. So like I was just having a conversation with my sister the other day. She's a 2-year-old kid, and it was either get the dog before baby comes so that it gets trained enough that baby can come into the house, or now she's got to wait a few years before she can get a dog, because she knows the amount of work that it takes to have that fairy tale kid and dog experience. She knows that the baby can't be 2. And then you bring a puppy in and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? So I think it just depends on what your expectations are with the dog, but coming from a professional trainer, giving professional advice, if you want the dream story, which is certainly possible, timing is everything. You have to have the time to put into the training, and dog selection is massively important, because you could just pick the wrong dog and at the wrong time and then just have a terrible experience when it could actually be like such a lovely experience. I don't want to discourage people with kids from getting dogs, but you got to be smart about it if it's going to actually be a nice experience.
Without giving away your secret sauce, is there anything specific tidbit-wise that you would give to a family to say, hey, when you go to the breeder, here's some things you should look for when looking for a puppy?
Yep. I would look for, well, first of all, most people aren't going to know a lot about reading dog body language. So it is important that you do trust the breeder and you trust their ability to be able to look at a puppy and be able to pick out traits that would be good. But in terms of the traits that you're looking for, is you want a puppy that's like middle of the road. You want a puppy that's confident enough that they're happy to kind of go and investigate. You know, if you go and visit the puppies, you want the puppy that's happy to come over to you, but isn't like needy, and that, you know, maybe we'll go off and play and then we'll come back and check you out again. You don't want to feel sorry for the puppy that's in the corner that's like, I'm too overwhelmed. And perhaps you don't want the puppy that's like hanging off of everybody's pant legs. That's the puppy I would probably go for. But you want to try and get middle of the road. The other advice that might surprise you is that if you have the opportunity to pick the puppy, go several times. Because sometimes if you show up and puppies have just had breakfast or whatever, they've just eaten, they've had a big play, you could go and there could be puppies that are a bit sleepy and you think, oh, well, maybe they're not that confident. Well, if you go like 3 days later, that puppy could be like off the rocker. So it's all about timing. Puppies are just so different. So you want to see them a bunch of times to know whether they're good. But again, the average person doesn't know enough about reading dog temperament to be able to pick. Most people go off looks. Most people go off feeling sorry for the puppy, or thinking they can help it or save it or whatever the situation is. And again, if you're prepared to do the work and you're in a situation where you can take that chance and then work through it, great, go for it. But it's not a smart choice if you have a family with kids. You want to make sure you get the right dog for your family so that it can be a positive experience. Also, not even just for you and the kids. Think about the dog. Like, I also have a soft spot for the dog. Sometimes I look at this puppy that's a little bit bashful or a little bit overwhelmed and there's kids running everywhere and like there's a lot going on in the family, and I think, oh, this poor dog probably just lives in constant chaos, lives constantly in like I don't really know what to do. I don't know and like that's stressful for them as well. So it's got to be a good match.
If you were going to give advice to the family that says, hey, we're going to get a puppy for our kid because our kid's wild and crazy and they need a little bit more responsibility, or they need something to tire them out, or they need something to keep them busy, what would your caution be to that family that says they're going to do that, or that's the reason why they're getting the puppy?
Yeah. I think I have seen so many scenarios like this where parents have wanted to get their dog, or their young child, a puppy so that they can have responsibility, so that they can have something to focus on. And of course, kids always say, I want a dog, I want a dog, I want a dog. So like you get the dog. But I have seen that scenario play out hundreds of times at this point. And there's only a few times where I felt like it was successful. Successful in the fact that the young kid actually did take on the responsibility, actually was invested in the training, was actively working towards things on a weekly basis, was happy to walk the dog, was happy to brush the dog, was happy to bathe the dog, was happy to feed the dog, all of that kind of stuff. But it's very, very unusual. Typically what I see is that the kids are more than happy to be involved because they like the dog. But when there's a challenge, or when the puppy's doing a lot of biting, or they're screaming in the middle of the night because they want to go outside, those when the kids are like, I don't want to do that. And then it ends up falling on the parent. The puppy isn't well behaved enough, so it needs a bit more training. That's where it falls on the parent. The dog needs more exercise. Kids at school, kids has soccer, kid has this. Dog needs to be walked, dogs need to be exercised, falls on the parent. So you have to be realistic to understand that if you're getting a dog, that 80% of it is probably going to be the family dog, or also the adult's dog, and then only a small portion will be solely the kid's dog. Again, it depends on the kid, depends on the age. All of the things have their little depends marker on them. But typically speaking, in all of the situations that I've had, it never works out that it is solely, truly the kid's dog. They can have a great relationship, but if you think that like this is like, you're not going to have to worry about it as the adult, as the parent in the family, you are highly, highly misjudging the situation. Honestly, and the other thing that is the big thing is I think that there's this like glorified thought or vision of like the family and like the kids and the dogs have this like sweet, adorable relationship and it's so cute. And those things can happen, but often we get people that will say, oh, I want to get a dog for my son, or I want to get a dog for my daughter. And, you know, the kid is like under 10, let's say. really, any kid that's going to get a dog under 10, it's never really going to be their dog. It's always going to fall on the responsibility, and it should always fall on the responsibility of the parent to take it to the vet, to get its dog food, to train it, to make sure it's going on X amount of walks a day. If you get a dog that has no training and you're expecting a kid under 10 years old or whatever, that's just an arbitrary number close off. It's just not going to work out well because kids are kids. And so I think if people can go into it with a better realistic expectation of how the kids are going to be involved, then I think that you would have a much more successful family dog, knowing that you're setting the dog up for success. I don't have any problem with kids being involved with the dogs as they're raising them. In fact, I think that that's excellent. I think there's lots of things that people can do with kids can do with dogs that help build a relationship. They can be part of the feeding. They can have the kid and the dog spend time together when they're watching TV or going to bed at night or whatever the situation is, going on walks together. But in terms of like actually teaching the dog to be a good family member in the household, I feel that the adults need to be a greater part of that in order for the relationship of the kid and the dog to actually be successful.
What would you say to people, and I know for our family, we've been subject to this too, that you think about getting a puppy because the time is right now, the kids are the right age now,
Yeah.
the work-life balance is good right now, the sports are good right now to be able to take care of a puppy.
Yeah.
But often people forget that this is a 10, 12, 15-year time investment. What would you say to the family that maybe isn't seeing that piece of the equation? They're just looking at today, this week, this year is a good time to get a puppy.
Totally. Dogs are an investment. You have to think about, like, for sure, like, I always say 10 to 15 years. Hopefully it's longer than that. But you have to think about what life's going to look like for that period of time. Where are you going to live? Do you want to be traveling? Like, it's a big commitment to have a dog, and it's life-changing. So you either have to be ready to embrace that life, and there's, like, arguably so many more things that dogs can bring to your life in terms of like positivity and joy and how meaningful it is and all of that stuff. I will never live with life without a dog. I can appreciate that. But if you're not used to having a dog and you have a busy family and that's not the lifestyle you're used to, you need to be ready for like a major change. And that has to be something that's considered for how much work am I going to put in for the first couple of years? And then, like you said, what is it going to look like for like the next 10 to 15 years? And if all of the boxes can be checked and you can get the right scenario, then perfect. Come and see us. We'll get you started. But I think it's something that people need to really, truly think about, because sometimes it just adds, I feel so sad sometimes for people because it's just adding so much more stress to their life than they really need. And when we say like, you need X, Y, Z in order to make the change, and I can see that they are maxed out emotionally, they are maxed out schedule wise. I sometimes think like, oh, why did you guys get a dog? Why? Like, this is the worst scenario, because the dog just doesn't get what it needs. It's all good intentions. We all want that. We all want that perfect family dog. But if you're not ready to do the work, it can be a bad situation.
I think people can easily visualize the idea of bringing home a puppy and what that might look like. But like you just said, the family that doesn't do the training, that gives the dog full freedom, that allows the dog to not listen, that there isn't consistency, that there isn't follow through, paint the picture for me and everybody at home what that dog looks like at a year. It's the golden retriever that everybody desired to get, and now this dog has been in limbo without any leader for the last year. You've seen hundreds of thousands of dogs come through the facility, both in person and online. Just paint us a picture of what that might look like so that people can see that side of the equation as well.
No, that is so true. You see like the kids and the puppies together, and it's cute. And obviously puppies at that age are pretty easy. It's not too bad. There's a few little things that are challenging, but what you don't see is flash forward to a year later where you have an 80-pound dog now. It's not 15 pounds anymore. And it's, barking in the backyard. It's digging your backyard apart. It's barking at the TV. It's barking at the windows when people walk by. It's jumping over everybody who comes in the house. Maybe it still has accidents. Maybe it still chews things when, it's not being left unsupervised. You're still dealing with things that you could probably accomplish in a few weeks early on if somebody was devoted to the work. You're still dealing with those things at a year old, and then that's just more baggage and more stress that's put on the parent. Or I always love when people get their dogs as their kids are a little bit older, and then the kid decides that they're going to go to university, can't take the dog. What do you do with the dog then? Well, you keep it. So now it's your dog. And now you're now keeping a dog that has all these problems, and it's going to be an issue. So it's never as glorified as people think that it is. And again, I'll reiterate, I don't want to deter people from doing it. I just want people to go into getting a dog. When you have kids, you need to have the right expectation. And the first 1 or 2 years of having a dog is totally changes how that dog is going to live within the family for the rest of its life. That's why we're so adamant about starting training early. Start when it's a puppy. Those first couple years are so critical. So if you can be a big part of that and make sure that the dog steps into life on the right paw or the right foot, however you want to say it, then it's not that big of a deal if life has to change and kids go away or whatever the situation is. It's just such a better scenario. It is interesting too, because it also makes people realize about where they're going to get the puppy, because my cousin just went to get a puppy, for example, and I gave him a bunch of things that you should ask him about. Separate the puppy that you want, separate it, play with it by itself. What it's like with its brothers and sisters are very different than what it's like when it's just you and them. Taking it to a place in the house that it's never been before, but some breeders are no, you have to pick the puppy at 2 weeks old or whatever, or we are going to pick the puppy for you. So, okay, if you're going to pick the puppy for me, do I trust that you know how to do it? Or are you just trying to get my $800 and get me out the door? So are people prepared? Do they care enough that the puppy is what they want it to be? And it doesn't even need to be obviously when I'm picking a puppy, I'm trying to pick a puppy with the sole goal of it being a world champion agility dog. So my criteria is not so. And I can appreciate that. But I also think that there can be a dialed back version of people who know how to ask the right questions and can also build the trust of a breeder, that the breeder actually knows enough. Lots of people breed dogs, they don't have a hot clue. They know nothing about personality, nothing at all. So you're going to go in and you're just handing your fate over to somebody that doesn't have a clue what they're doing, how they raise a puppy. I would want to give people knowledge on how puppies are raised. If I walk in and I see certain setups on how are they being litter trained? Do they have interactive toys? Are they spending, how much time with humans are they spending? Have they been around kids yet? What's the situation? Are they around other dogs in the household, or are they being isolated? Do they hear the vacuum every day? There's all kinds of things that would be really interesting for you to know. I know we're maybe getting off topic, but all of this is fascinating because people might not even know how important it is for puppies to hear vacuums when they're little. Well, it makes them less scared of a vacuum when they go back to your house. The stuff that we do with puppies to try and build their world experience so that we go and plop them in a new space, they don't crumble. A lot of breeders don't do that. I would rather spend $800 on from somebody who's done all that with a puppy than $1,500 on a designer doodle that has basically been in a whelping box for the first 8 weeks of its life. I'm going to have way more work to do with that dog than this dog. Part of what's weird about what we're saying is that it almost sounds as somebody who makes a living off of dog training, it sounds a little bit like I'm telling people not to get a dog. But the reason why I'm doing that is because I care so deeply about people's success with their dog that I'm willing to say to you, be smart about what you're doing. Don't just go get a bunch of dogs that we get a bunch of people coming to say, help me, help me, help me. We care about the dogs. We care about your success. Be smart about it. Don't just do it because you think it's a good idea. Are you truly ready to get one? And when you have kids, you really have to think about it. What I'm trying to drive home here is that it's important that if you're going to make the decision to get a dog, that it needs to be the right one, and that it needs to be the right one for you and your family. And then if you listen to this and, it's all making sense and you're checking the boxes and it sounds like you're ready to pick the perfect puppy for your family, then check out this video right there. On that note, I'm Kayl. Happy training.